Hello, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I'm back on my series on stories from the Puranas. In our last video, we saw how Shiva and Parvati got married, how Parvati had convinced Lord Shiva to get married to her through her devotion and her meditation, and how the marriage ceremony was solemnized. All the gods and the goddesses and the sages had attended the wedding and blessed the couple, and how Menka, mother of Parvati, had actually fainted when she saw Shiva for the first time because his body was smeared in ashes and he was surrounded by ghosts and spirits all around him, and how once Shiva appeared in his beautiful divine form, then she got convinced and finally agreed to give her daughter in marriage to Lord Shiva, and actually apologized to Lord Shiva for doubting Lord Shiva when she saw him for the first time, as to maybe this was not the best match for her daughter. And as we know through our earlier videos as well, there was a purpose of Parvati getting married to Shiva, and one of the purpose was that Parvati was none other than Sati, who was married to Shiva in her past life and who had committed suicide at her father Daksha's ceremonial fire ceremony because she felt insulted. She felt that Lord Shiva was insulted there, and she was not invited, yet she appeared in that ceremony. And people who have not watched that video, I would recommend please go and watch that. So Sati, or Parvati, was no other than Devi Sati, who had committed suicide. So it was important for Parvati to get reunited with her husband Shiva. So that was one purpose of the marriage. And the other purpose of the marriage was that the great demon Tarakasura had created havoc in the three worlds. He had driven the gods out of the heavens and had become a menace because of the boons given to him by Lord Brahma, saying that he could be killed by none other than Shiva's son, and he knew that Shiva had no son at that point. So it was imperative that Shiva should get reunited first with his wife of her earlier birth, which is Parvati in this birth, and also have a son who could destroy and kill the great demon Tarakasura, who had created all kinds of problems for the gods. And one of the mission was accomplished, that Shiva and Parvati got married and they went to their abode to live in Mount Kailasha. And the other mission was yet to be accomplished, which was they could have a son who would then finally destroy and kill the demon Tarakasura. So after Lord Shiva and Parvati went to Mount Kailasha, their abode, they had a son, and the son was called Skanda or Kartikeya. When the baby was very small, it somehow got lost in some reeds. Reeds are little plants which appear in water or in marshy areas, and it got lost somehow. It's very difficult to think of how could Shiva and Parvati's son get lost, but there was probably a divine purpose behind that. So it was not as if because of carelessness the child was lost. It had a divine purpose, and this is coming directly from the Puranas. So the child was lost in some reeds, and 6 princesses discovered the baby in the reeds, and each of those 6 princesses wanted to bring up the baby as their own son. However, there was a disagreement, and everybody wanted to bring up their baby as their own son. So they had a discussion, and they finally came to an agreement. And they said, okay, we will all jointly bring up the baby or the child. And these princesses were nothing, but they were Kritikas. Now, Kritikas is another story from the Puranas, which we'll discuss in our forthcoming videos. But these princesses were actually 6 Kritikas. Kritikas are divine creatures, and they were reborn as princesses. So everything was happening because of this divine Maya, or, well, not Maya exactly, because Maya is illusion. This was real. The divine plan, I should be saying. Everything was happening with the divine plan. And so these 6 Kritikas were born as 6 princesses, and there was a divine purpose why they would be finding this baby who is Shiva and Parvati's son in the reeds, and they will jointly bring up the baby. So they came up to an agreement that they will, and they finally did. And of course, as we know that Lord Kartikeya has 6 heads. He is a 6-headed god, Skanda or Kartikeya. 2 names. There are other names also. One of the names of Lord Kartikeya is Subramanya. Some people call him as, or he is referred rather as, Shanmuga. So there are different names for the same god who is Shiva and Parvati's son. So these princesses did raise, or these princesses who are actually the Kritikas, the divine creatures, but born as princesses, did raise Lord Kartikeya as their own, and jointly. And after the baby was a little older and he was a young boy, the gods came to know from sage Narada. Narad Muni, as some people called him, as Sanskrit, but for the benefit of the West, who would be more familiar with his name, Narada, I will be pronouncing him as Narada. So the gods came to know from sage Narada, or Devarishi. He is actually the rishi of, or the sage of the gods, or the Devatas. So that's how he's called, Devarishi. They came to know from sage Narada that Lord Kartikeya had been brought up by the Kritikas. But they were princesses in this present birth, but actually they were Kritikas, who are divine creatures. And the gods came and they appointed Lord Kartikeya as the general of their army. And then the army of the gods then invaded Tarakasura's city, Shonitapura. If you refer to my earlier videos, you will see that Tarakasura made his city's name, or named his city where he was ruling from, as Shonitapura. So the army of the gods invaded Shonitapura, which was Tarakasura's headquarters, or his city, and a terrible fight raged for 10 days. And the gods were victorious. They completely decimated the demons and Lord Kartikeya, because they had the power of Kartikeya. They knew that Kartikeya is Shiva's son, and the boon given by Lord Brahma had said that only Shiva's son can kill Tarakasura. So they were full of high spirits and morale, and while they were fighting the demons, so they completely destroyed the demons. And eventually, after 10 days, Lord Kartikeya killed the demon Tarakasura. There were victory celebrations all over, and after the victory celebrations, Lord Kartikeya joined his parents in Mount Kailasa. So he was restored. So the whole divine purpose was accomplished. First, Parvati and Shiva coming together. Second, they're getting married. Third, they're having a son. Fourth, the Kritikas, or actually who were the princesses in this present birth, but they were actually Kritikas. They had to raise the little baby, bring him up to a young boy's age. The gods coming and appointing Lord Kartikeya as the general of the army of the gods. And then the gods invading Shonitapura, which was Tarakapura's city, and eventually killing the demon Tarakasura, who had created a menace in the 3 worlds. So hopefully you enjoyed this story, which is coming directly from the Puranas. This is not fiction, so I will recommend, please believe in this story. A lot of people call Hindu stories as mythology. This is because mythology means myth, and this is not a myth. This is true stories coming from the Puranas. The Puranas are extremely precious, especially to the Hindus. And in the meanwhile, I will recommend subscribe to my channel, check out my website. There is a link below, and I will see you very soon in my series of the stories from the Puranas. Goodbye.